To the soldiers fighting in the Flanders region of Belgium during World War I, common poppies were what one writer called a beacon of resurrection. You see, the seeds of these annual red wildflowers can lie dormant for 80 years or more, only germinating when the soil is disturbed and the seeds exposed to light. On the fields around Flanders, trench warfare and artillery battles ravaged the earth, bringing poppy seeds to the surface. Fed by lime from leveled buildings and nitrogen from bombs, the flowers grew abundantly. No one really noticed them at first, but a year after the war's start in 1914, soldiers began describing them in their letters home. They wrote poems too, but none so famous as the one penned by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, a Canadian doctor who dashed it off after a particularly grueling stretch of days treating the wounded and dying. McCrae was a medical officer for the 1st Canadian Field Artillery, treating the wounded in an 8-foot by 8-foot bunker he had dug out of the bank of a nearby canal. In the spring of 1915, the Second Battle of Ypres raged on for more than a month. McCrae described it as a nightmare. When McCrae's friend Lieutenant Alexis Helmer was killed that spring, he was laid to rest in Essex Farm Cemetery, his grave among the wild red poppies marked with a simple wooden cross. McCrae could see the cemetery from the door of his bunker. The next day, during a break, as he waited for more wounded soldiers to arrive, McCrae sat down on the back of an ambulance, took a piece of paper from his dispatch book, and began to write.
In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark her place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard above the guns below.
In Flanders Fields was published in the British magazine Punch in 1915 and quickly became the most famous poem of World War I. McCrae died of pneumonia in early 1918 while serving at a Canadian hospital in France. His comrades looked for poppy flowers to adorn his grave, but finding none, they bought a wreath of artificial poppies from Paris instead. It was a harbinger, perhaps, of how the Flanders red poppy would come to be forever associated with war, death, and remembrance. In November of 1918, 2 days before the armistice was declared, Moina Michael was in her basement office at Columbia University when she picked up the newest edition of the Ladies' Home Journal. The poem, under its alternate title We Shall Not Sleep, was published there, along with an evocative graphic featuring the ghosts of soldiers rising from a graveyard. Born in Georgia to a family with roots in Belgian Flanders, Michael had left her teaching job in Georgia earlier that year to volunteer with the YMCA's Overseas War Secretaries Program at Columbia. She had read the poem before, but it struck her in a new and vivid way. In that moment, she vowed always to wear red poppies, poppies of Flanders Fields. She also wrote a quick response to McCrae's poem titled We Shall Keep the Faith.
And now the torch and poppy red we wear in honor of our dead. Fear not that ye have died for naught. We'll teach the lesson that ye wrought in Flanders Fields.
After hearing the poem, her colleagues sent her off in search of red poppies. Upon returning at last with silk flowers she found in a department store, Moina Michael sparked a long-standing tradition, one that would also take hold in Canada, Great Britain, France, Australia, and New Zealand. Michael wasn't the only one interested in promoting the red poppy as a symbol of remembrance. In France, Madame Anna Guérin envisioned an inter-allied nations campaign for the flower, using silk poppies made by French war widows and sold wholesale to veterans groups around the world. During her visit to an American Legion convention in Cleveland in 1919, the group proclaimed her the Poppy Lady of France. Eventually, though, American and British veterans groups thought it better if the poppies could be made by disabled soldiers. In May of 1922, the Veterans of Foreign Wars organized the first national sale of poppies for Memorial Day in the U.S. and adopted the poppy as its official symbol. That same year, the American Legion returned to it as their official flower after briefly embracing the daisy. 2 years later, the organization formed a national program to distribute red poppies every year. American Legion poppy began showing up in seed catalogs in 1923 as an improved variety of the Flanders poppy, noted for its vivid colors and long bloom time. Common poppies, also known as corn poppies or Shirley poppies, are native to the Mediterranean, and they grow in the US, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Their blooms are predominantly scarlet, but breeding has created other beautiful colors, including the ephemeral Amazing Gray. Poppies are carefree plants, and they easily naturalize under the right conditions. Some people consider them invasive, but however you view them, as an enduring spiritual symbol, ultimate horticultural survivor, or pesky invader, may the red poppy always be the flower of remembrance.